think we're.
You feel ready?
I feel like we're ready. Yeah, I think.
Let's do it.
Should we do it?
Не забудь пару
Okay.
фотографий, так
All
чтобы
right.
был красивый.
Yeah, let's gather around, everyone. I think what's nerve-wracking to me is actually like the camera.
I know. It's like, oh, it's official.
Yeah, it feels very. Yeah, but let's go ahead and have everybody gather around if you haven't already, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Yay.
So, welcome to everybody tonight to this artist talk with Zhenya Parish. It's my pleasure to speak with you, and I'm hoping that we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about what your time at the Innovation Studio has been like here in Amazon's HQ2, and then also talk about your practice broadly and where you're headed next. So we'll go ahead and get that started.
Yay.
So, Zhenya Parish, thank you. You've got your greatest fans here, I can tell. I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about when you first knew you were an artist. How did you get into this world?
You know, I looked, we wrote out a few questions. So I looked at them, I'm like, when did I? And what was the answer? I think really always, because when I was little, I scribbled, it's just I didn't know if I want to be artist, actor, or musician. So it was along those lines.
Oh, interesting.
But when I was 11, though, I was born in Russia, and at 11 years, I wanted to go to teenager art school. And when I approached my mom, and she kind of like, oh, another hobby of a kid. So I lived in a 1.3 million city. I traveled all the way to another side of city. I get all the paperwork. I went to a doctor. I got all my everything, filled it out, and then I brought it to my mom and asked her to sign it. Like, that's all you have to do, Mom, just sign it. And I took it back. And so I went for 3 years of our teenager art school, where I did all my classical exploration in art for a few years. I never really got to finish it because it was 2 schools every day. And then I became a more teenager. But eventually I moved to the United States, and I went to Kansas State University for my fine art in oil painting. That was my next step. And then about 3 years ago, actually, October 1st will be 3 years when I decided to go full-time artist.
Wow.
Completely. So that's, in short, the journey.
Yeah.
But
How did the idea come to you to merge the world of performance, music, and painting all together?
So when I just moved to DMV, not just, but when I moved to DMV, I didn't have a studio. And then eventually I became a mom. Even my living room was not able to be my studio space. My studio was anything that could fit in my backpack. So I had some art supplies, I had sketchbooks, I had little paints, markers, and I would steal the time and make the time in between everything I had to do to be a mom, to go to work, and in between the bus station. So whatever it is, I worked at a music venue at the time. Between the bands, I would pull out my sketchbook and I'll let it be in a space. I just wanted it to be proactive, even though I didn't have dedicated space and time. So I was finding the time. I was like here and there. So it kind of became my maybe subconscious practice of that, being in environments and noodling and doodling and creating. And then eventually, shortly after, in 2018 precisely, I worked at the Black Cat, local space music venue, and they had summer available for open opportunities. Like if anybody has any ideas or want to do anything, and as I was driving, I'm like, the sun hit right, and the bridge was beautiful. That bridge we always cross from Arlington to DC. You stop in the moment, you acknowledge how lucky we are to be around all that, and I don't know, it just came. I'm like, I want to maybe collaborate with musical acts. And so I pitched the idea to the club, and they said yes. So my first event was in a really cool space of a black cat. And Sonia, who I've met in 2018, was the first person I reached out to, she was suggested to me. And she said yes to my idea, and that's how idea came. It developed throughout the time. It shifted into, but the base of that, yes. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. And when you were sketching in your notebook early on, before the revelation of I want to do all of these things at the same time, did you notice that there was some kind of a relationship between what you were drawing and what you were listening to?
I think it always has been, but I recently started paying attention more to it because everything is vibrational, or at least with me, everything I pay attention, or I'm very aware of vibrations all around. So subconsciously or consciously will affect and will come. But at that time, I was going, a lot of my sketches were coming out, I feel like from my childhood, certain stories that were big, like raw and heavy and honest and vulnerable. And I had a book of all the sketches, and I carried it around, and one day I took it to Turkey, and I left my carry-on in a cab. And I spent a week looking for that cab in the whole Istanbul. I never found it. And I think it's part of the art of letting go process of developing after. I'm like, okay, then I don't have it.
Wow. Yeah, that's a painful story. but I think, like you said, that there's something about that letting go that has informed how you make things now. So following that line organically, I'm wondering if you can talk about vibrations and this kind of mystical quality that the work has, and your interest in that, and how you tap into vibrations, and what the art of letting go means to you. And that is what you call the entire practice. Is that true? Or
yes and no. I mean, for the last few years, I called it the art of letting go. I now shifted into balancing act. But also, as I trying to balance, I realizing the art of letting go, it's always going to be always on point to anybody. Anyone can always relate to that in any time and any age. We're constantly growing, evolving. We see it with kids' progression. It's the same with us. So the art of letting go always going to be relevant to the moment. But the art of letting go came in, I think, as a healing element to myself. And how spend the last 3 years, well, I don't even know where to start, because it's simple, but it's a lot, and it started one way, it developed, and what it is now, it has different, not necessarily meaning, but effect of that. And as a performance goes, preparing for performance, it is art and performance almost like two different arts combined together, which I had to develop as well. As an artist, or I remember before performing, we're very private usually, like don't look, to share the process and unfinished process is like, no, till the ending, or not even then, you know. Performing took a different mindset and different sharing, and I wanted it to share my process, I wanted it to share my philosophy, I wanted it to share what helped me throughout my life, good and hard times, what helped me to elevate, what helped me to do better, what helped me. So that's kind of where performance came along. That's the healing element for me as a performer. It also, you know, sometimes I prepare. And the way I prepare, it's like you don't prepare, but you prepare. The goal is not to have a goal. but you still prepare. It's simple and complicated. I'll take a couple days usually. I'll think about, because I do live painting performances in various venues. There are galleries, there are clubs, they are private events, they are music venues, and each place has its own expectation and vibration. And each single time I collaborate with different musicians. It could be one, like we had a performance here in Friday, violin player. It could be 5, it could be 3, it could be 3 sets of 1 hour each. It could be a club, like Flash, where I would paint. Like sometimes I'm an accent to a party, sometimes I'm the party. It all depends, and based on that, that's how I take my mind to prepare for. Let's say if it's my party and I'm hosting the event that called Canvas Vibration, I invite musicians, I look for musicians. Since I worked in music venues for many years, I'm in a good network with lots of different musical talents. And then, again, it's different. In the past, I would go on the hikes. I think nature is a big preparational element for me. If I can, I'll go on the long hikes. I take about a couple days to emotionally prepare for event. Because what do I want first? What do I deliver? As a performer, it's like, how do I make it interesting? Because especially beginning, it's a bit of a drag, because you can't really tell what I'm about there. But if you stick through and music goes along, then right about in the middle, I think that's where it really gets interesting, because then I'll throw the surprise element to you, and whatever you thought gonna happen, it won't happen anymore. I will completely go back and change for effect of a performing, for not shock moment, but more of like, well, that didn't go that way. Basically, it's a story for everybody to discover. Sometimes I look back, there's so many stories. I'm like, I wish I stopped there. I wish I stopped there. That was cool. That was cool. But as I'm a little bit all over right now, but as the art of letting go, I try to like, it's okay. Just let it go. Just you're gonna land where you're gonna land. So I prepare like that to understand where I'm gonna be, the space, the energy, the musicians, me, what do I bring as a performer and what do I bring as a messenger? Because it's usually the messages that I try to carry along, or energy.
Well, so the written question was, and I'm glad we got here naturally, but what does the ideation process look like? So I think that in a lot of ways you've answered that. But I think it might be helpful for the audience that's tuning in on YouTube to describe what a performance with you looks like. And I attended the one on the 30th. And it's interesting to hear that there's really kind of a thought process and almost like a science or like a sequencing to how you're thinking about how an event is going to unfold. So if it's all right, I'll sort of relate some of the things that I observed while the performance was ongoing.
I'm actually curious.
Yeah. So you worked with Zhenya, who is somebody that you've known since 2019. And she plays a violin. And I noticed that she loops her music. And so she's actively doing that while you're painting. And I'll get to my question about that in a second. But you deliberately started with a square shape, and I remember early on in the evening you said, looking at the space, there were so many squares and rectangles, I wanted something a little bit more round. So there was a circular opening within the canvas that had been painted pink. The entire thing was pink, so it was a square structure, like a frame, and then in the middle was a circle. And you went about the process of beginning the painting. I started to think, is there a deliberate beginning, middle, and end to the way that you're thinking about a performance, both in the sound that's being played and the type of gesture that's being used? And then I noticed there were just moments and breaks in the performance where things would happen. So you would take the canvas and rotate it. And that happened, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 times over the course of the evening.
It happened that time. It was more rotating, like 5, 6. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Did you calculate the number of times it was going to happen, or is that very organic?
It was very organic.
Okay.
I don't there's certain calculations that I go about it. How fast it's gonna drive, where I can work, where I can leave it, where I can flip it. But flipping is also effective for the speed of the moment. Like if I flip, but also to check to see a harmony, the balance of how it floats. Because if I can't see it right away, and if I flip, the harmony and the balance, like visuals, composition, where to add, even if I'm gonna go get back to original, but it helps to harmonize and to create composition in a floating way.
I wondered also about the choice to paint that whole canvas pink. And this kind of leads me to a question about your color scheme. I found myself wondering what choices you were making about your palette, whether or not it was seasonal, if there was something else that was dictating either which colors you begin with and then which colors you selected, because you had a whole group of paint pots that you were selecting from. And I just kept on thinking, like, what is it that's how are you making that choice? Is it truly improvised and in the moment, or is this something that you pre-thought? I'm just curious.
There's few things. It's intuitive mainly, but I feel like, in a very purple and pink era.
Yeah.
And I think it's subconscious. It's not like I want purple. It's a feeling. It's period where I am. This is what I'm exploring. Maybe it's the energy, that kind of, but also try not to limit myself just because of that. It is intuitive. It is understanding warm, cold, depth, contrast. One thing I wanted it to be pastel in this year. That was my only requirement for myself to elevate from more like, what is this, 2022. So it shifted it definitely, and it was an intentional shift. I think but also, and my friend who always says, and who is a great support, and often a lot at my shows, and she will always point out, and I never even try to do that. She's like, look what you're wearing and look at your painting. It will always come up. Every single time it will reflect. So it's a reflection of what around. I mean, at one point, and then I'll cover it up because I tend to keep on going. But my earrings will show up, my painting will show up, my dress colors will show up around. And so it all depends. Sometimes I do wake up and I'm like, oh, this color. Green and yellow, that's what today. And sometimes it's just what happens. But
yeah. Does the structure of a piece, do you find yourself returning to certain motifs, and do you compositionally gravitate to certain things, or is this all, because I noticed, for example, the circle appears in quite a few of the canvases that I've seen here, and in this case the circle was the structure that you were operating with.
And you're right, thank you for bringing it up. I did go on the walk. This area is new to me. So I do live in Arlington, but courthouse, and I don't spend enough time around this area, so I was intrigued. I would go on the walk just to study, like, what is, how do people walk? Where do they going? How do they perceive things? What does it look like? And just kind of like anthropology, study of a block to see where I am and what I work with and what I can bring, like what I give and what I take. It's that and then as I sat there at the light, everything looked very tall, but I really enjoyed the city kind of scene. I was surprised, the city element. People are out in the evenings and they're active and they're going fast though. Everyone works very fast in this area. but everything was tall and triangle and square. So I'm like, need a circle. And I had that frame already. I'm like, that could be great. Adding element, so when I travel for my events, I pack my car. It's my studio and I go. And I travel to different spaces, energies, vibrations. And like I said, sometimes I study and prepare for that, but also I always have to like, what am I bringing? Like, what am I bringing to that time and space? And so I have my lights and lamps. I have my carpet that always goes. The element, it's like my vibe, my energy, my corner, like that carpet, this colorful lights and the lamps, or like a easel. And so that was part of me. What am I bringing to this block? So for me, it was a circle.
Nice. I also, the two moments that stood out to me, there were several, but like I think the moments of greatest drama for me was towards the end. You used gray, and you really went for it. Every single.
What about the black?
Yeah, that
black.
too. Because everything was looking extremely harmonious, and then there was this kind of sharp left turn in terms of the palette choice and also the gesture. Because I noticed that like a lot of your strokes are quite small, and then there'll be a couple of moments where you do something a little more organic, but these moments were really, really big, and it almost felt like you covered things up. And then the orange at the end, I was really surprised by. I think that was towards the very, very tail end of the piece. And I wondered, as you were doing these things, I was wondering about your paint, because I noticed that you used industrial paint, Behr. And I was wondering if you have, I'm curious why you use that in particular. Is there something about the pigments you like, the texture, especially knowing that you're trained as an oil painter? I was just curious about that.
It works well with my speed at the moment, and it works well with the way I express. So I do have, I went for bachelor's fine art in oil painting, and it's a different field. And to me, it was challenging because I never really used oil paint. That's why I went for that. And it's more romantic, it's more time consuming, it's a different feel, it's a different way of expressing, but also it requires proper ventilation and proper things, and it takes long. The way I experiencing life right now is very quick. Every time, every day, and we go. What do we have to learn today? What can I change today? And what do we paint? New painting, new adventure, new nature. So it started out as a oops paint, because finance is also important. And I think art supplies are extremely expensive, probably for a reason, but artists, it's lots of, if your studio is in your backpack, then you work with what you can. So it started out with a oops paint. Home Depot would have 50 cents oops paints. So I went there for years. Every single time I drive to search anywhere, I search for Home Depot and I go to oops section. So always, anywhere. So I collected for over years so much oops paint. Some dull colors, some bright colors. But then I grew to really like it. I love the texture of that. First of all, the thickness. I can go, it suits exactly well to my expression of the moment right now, where I am. It's the thickness of that. It goes thick, it dries fast, but it also allows me to work with that. Like, you'll see scribbling in there. I can add a chalk, different multimedia. It dries fast. It gives me dramatic effects when I need to. Sometimes I look like I'm wiping things off, or I don't know what I'm doing maybe, but really I'm just drying up layer for next layer to come on top. So everything like, oh, I'm performing, but really I'm planning the next step here.
It's great.
Right, so that and then I even now those days, when I do have color theme, I go and I use the same paint, and I'll pay $7 for a can instead of 50 cents. But I will choose. I don't know. I like how it works, and plus large scale canvases.
Yes.
You can do oil. You can really acrylic, the smaller tubes. The way I express, big brush, big canvas. So I need lots of paint.
Yeah. I was wondering about the scale of the work too. Is it very tailored to the space and your body? I'm just wondering what the relationship between canvas size, your body, and the venue might be.
Yes, always yes. Also, my energy, I have to measure my energy level. More canvas, more energy requires. Like even on August 30th, when I looked on this 4 feet by 4 feet canvas at the beginning, I got overwhelmed because I knew we only have 1 hour and a half. And so the way I operate, I program myself for the time. Like I have hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 or 4. And I'm a little covering all over, right?
No, this is great. This is good.
So just like any other genre of art or form, there's a background, middle ground, and a foreground. So I have to separate this hour and a half in that kind of formula, or 3 hour, whatever I have. First, it's a background. I give certain time, and I try not to be too timed, because we're still practicing the art of letting go, and goal not to have a goal, and the float of that, but then there's a middle ground, and then there's a front ground. As a background, I'm starting feeling the energy, I'm collecting vibrations, what I think I understand about it through my personal understanding, but it's all together. Then there's a middle ground, and then front ground. This is where in my head it goes, time to land a painting, time to land a painting.
Interesting.
So then I'm like, okay, what do we do now? Smaller brushes, more details, less of this, and more like sitting and going into, does it brings it out? Is there enough storytelling? Is it enough for eye to float? Is there enough balance? Is there enough harmony? Then I keep flipping till we get to, and then if I'm really lucky, throughout the evening, it can be all done in one take. And that is, to me, when people ask, how was your night? I measure it to how I feel about the painting. It's not about everything else, it's how I felt about it, to which point I got this, and I'm like, oh, the painting is like exactly, oh my goodness, I'm so, like, that surprise element. And sometimes I don't always harmonize based on my practice of audience participation. Sometimes not everything is in my control due to that practice. Certain places and times I allow audience to participate. The only rule, don't get it touched, because I practice that with myself. So I share this process, like, you're welcome to participate anywhere, any color, but don't get it touched. I'm gonna go back, and like, I'm not getting it touched. I'm letting you to, this is my space, but sometimes I have to turn away. It helps for the art of letting go.
This is bringing up two questions for me. I'm dying to know if we could have maybe an analysis of the painting that you performed that evening and what you tapped into. Now that you can look back at the painting, what is it that you picked up on that evening? And where did you see it show up?
Do you want to bring a painting? You want to see a painting?
Sure.
Maybe I can ask somebody.
Sure.
It's kind of heavy, Sarah. Maybe someone can help you. Thank you, Dwayne. It's in the corner down there.
Yeah.
What I picked out. Can you ask a question?
Yeah. That evening, that painting in particular, I don't know if you remember anything really striking you. Maybe it wasn't something you were aware of. You were making it, and like after the fact, you've looked at the painting and said, "Oh, I was picking up on this feeling a lot, and that's why I chose this color," or "I see a lot of this type of energy in this work. This is where it showed up." I just wonder how you read the audience that
Thank
evening.
you. I'll grab it from here.
Oh, here we go. Fantastic.
So this was on August 30th,
Yes.
when we worked with the, in collaboration. This is my painting. I can lean it against it. I'm okay with that. This is 1 hour and a half. That was recycled tabletop wood. I attached canvas. I primed it all in this color. That's what you were talking about.
It's sort of
Everything
peachy.
was that color. It was a circle in a square, right? Circle in a square. I
Yeah,
like
perfect.
That. Say that. Honestly, I was slightly intimidated and nervous, but comfortably intimidated and nervous because time I had was short. I didn't know how it will be received at the same time, but and the size was really large for such a short time. And I didn't. It's an always surprising element, but I'm always nervous every time I started painting because I don't know, and that is exciting element as well. But I'm confident enough that something will come out because I've been practicing and doing it for a while now. That at the end, interesting things comes out when you allow this process. What I thought about it, it was very pastel at first. Very pastel, as you say, because I'm like, I'm gonna be in the pastels. I'm gonna be in the pastels. I have my serious face when I like zoom in or like. I'm so glad no one sees that. They usually see my back because it's very concentrated, and it's almost like I fall in a time hole or something, time vibe or time, like as present as I am, as vibrating with everybody, and nothing else exists, not even me at the same time. It's allowing your gesture and just what do you think you feel and keep on going. Started out rough and I wasn't happy at first. I'm like, what is this? Am I actually like not gonna come through this time? But the more I went, I felt the space, I felt the warmth, and it kept on going. Colors surprised me. It was not a goal, it was not a plan, it was not purple either, really. Then pastels started coming out a lot, and I liked it, but it didn't feel enough contrast. I'm like, like, don't be afraid of color. Why are you so strict? So, I self-conversate with myself when I paint. So I have these dialogues. Either it's about a word I'm meditating about or trying to discover something for myself, or it's a process, or both at the same time. And then I dialogue with myself, like, okay, so why do you think pastel is just a pastel? Oh, for a happy element. Okay, you got it happy, but the life is chaos. There's all of that. Why don't you bring all of that, but then harmonize all of that? Like, it's okay. So it's like that, and then the black came, and the gray came.
Gray.
And then I do have certain repetitive gestures that I think engraved into me subconsciously, sometimes purposely, sometimes I recognize them.
Yeah. Do you have a dance background at all?
No, but I've been told I have a natural rhythm. There you go.
Yeah, it was just because I remember also there being a lot of gestures throughout the performance. Shoulders, sort of moving with the music, and then kind of coming back.
You should see what I do in the studio. Ooh, the whole the dedication to studio is daily. I'm there. Doesn't mean I paint every day. I do this. I stretch sometimes. I try to understand what I'm feeling. What do I need? Do I need to work on my body? Do I need to stare in the dot and think about my next step? Do I need to... This many projects, paintings I'm going, which one I identify with today, to self-conversate and be honest about it, not force yourself. It shouldn't be forced. It should be easier but dedicated to it on a daily basis. I work at night usually. I put my son to sleep. I go to a studio. This is my quiet. I don't have to drive anywhere, and I also take care of my grandma. So when everyone sleeps, I paint.
Oh, that's great. Oh, so thinking about collaboration and that being a part of all of this work, I'm wondering about your time at the studio, because I know that you had a very different practice during the Innovation Studio residency, where you were inviting people to come and make things with you. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about some of those.
Here experience? Again, I every single time I challenge myself. Sometimes I'm like, why do I do this? Like, I stretch this large canvas, and then I get scared. I took a picture next to it while it was still white, and I looked very tiny. And then really, I'm like, what am I gonna do? Like, why? But I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. Then, because I do audience participation, I share my process. I find exciting and healing. I love street arts. I love walking from point A to point B and run into something, and then you go like, oh, you know, and your day is already like brightens up, feels like, and you're like, so part of being in Amazon building and lots of people working here, that was to me, I've been in this working space in that studio, and my bottom painting turning into community collaging composition. I have little straps of, so because usually people can collaborate with me, not usually, sometimes. It all depends, place, time, and the mood, my mood, and how much energy I have to work with people. But so because of audience participation, and I love audience participation, it teaches me a lot, it brings us together. I love how people always enthusiastic about adding or collaborating or being part of that. There are times I feel like sometimes there's lines of people just to put either a word, a dot, some bring, like they open their phone and they stand there and they try to make a perfect something. And I'm like, and I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, how little do they know the art of letting go? Like, that's why I give heads up right at the beginning. The art of letting go, don't get attached. And I try not to be rude and like go, blah, blah, blah. I'll be gently moving the canvas around, so I'll be adding everywhere till it becomes again into puff or something.
Yeah.
Why did I start talking? The community, and so people want to express. They want to be part, they're excited, they're also like, whatever happens in the world or in their personal lives, some want to write words, they just want to make statements. I've experienced really strong events, especially when it's more in the open, like yes. and so here I wanted a community participation, but because I stretch very large canvases and I didn't know how I'm gonna interact with those canvases. So in a collaboration with my friend, Michael O'Connor, who always has great ideas, he's like, why don't you have a scraps? I'm like, what a brilliant idea. This way, nobody's on my way, interacting with my time, space, energy, and what's going on, and it allows me to understand myself, what I'm doing, and then it's participation, and then I still didn't know what I'm gonna do. I collected so many pieces, I'm like, what am I gonna do with that? And it usually, if you put enough of your mind and allow to trust the process and know that it will come, it will come.
Yeah.
And it came. I'm like, oh, I know. So I started putting composition with pieces. And somewhere I'm like, what am I going to do with this one? How? And it worked perfectly. It was no... that's what I was telling a friend earlier. I use people energy as my color. So all of that energy and dedicated, voluntarily gifted to my project pieces is a color for me that I'm building a composition with, which also will make a community painting, which, and then being once we had people from upstairs on Amazon. And then, I don't know if they follow me on stories or not, but one day I posted that I collaged the pieces. The next day, people came to see if they're like, did my piece get in? I'm like, oh, that was so cute. And they're looking in front of the painting, looking for the piece, like, did they get in? Did they get in? I'm like, oh, everybody get in. Everyone get in.
That's
like,
so
I put
good.
all of them there. It's everybody is
Oh,
there.
that's so cool. So I'm wondering about you mentioned street art, and I think that's such an interesting reference. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more. I'll tell you why I find that interesting. I remember when I was a teenager, we used to live in a city on a city square where there was a public space where we could watch graffiti writers. And people who really did like excellent writing usually had this background, foreground, or the background, middle ground, foreground, and it's structured very similarly in a way to what I saw you do in this painting. So that just occurred to me as you said street writer. I wonder if you could talk to us about any other artistic references you might have from the fine art world, anything at all. Actually, let me also mention that I wonder about your painting as performance or performance resulting in painting, and whether or not artists like Jackson Pollock, I thought about Yves Klein. He did a series of paintings where he used human beings as brushes, women that he dragged across the canvas. They did a performance to a bunch of people playing cello, a single note on a cello for like 20 minutes. So I don't know whether or not.
I love hearing it. Like, I don't know. I'm like, oh wow, like that's a way.
Yeah, I don't know if these are all influences or if there's something else that has influenced you.
This is not necessarily a tough question, but I get asked this a lot, and my influences is you, and you, and you, and you, and everything around. This is my influence. I live a busy kind of life and active that there's no enough time, not that, but I think everything is influences. I don't have one particular influence or that I look up. What I personally find to discover, I take time to develop my own thought. Either it's spiritual, philosophical, or creative. I take stubbornly, I will sit and get to like, I'm gonna get the answer. And then like the art of letting go, like my friends said to me like, oh look, there's a whole art of like spiritual practices, the art of letting go. I'm like, oh, good for them. I did not look them up. I came up with that on my own, but it's nothing new. It's the same thing, same practice, same element. I came to that, and you know, sometimes you can hear many times, but you gotta learn and experience your own way. I never look up artists. I never look up in general things, and I don't have strong influences, but my always strong influence is love. And I can't, love, light, those are my key elements when I paint. In a chaotic or in a busy or in a peaceful, humans, I'm human as much as I try to be better. I have my weaknesses and I have my things I work through. And what was my point?
I love the influences,
Yeah, so it's something like live painting. Clearly it's not a new thing. People have done it before and they do it now. I came up with that. For me, I came up with that. For me, I came up with the art of letting go. And not that I did, I think the energy is, it's there, it's good. But I'm happy to see everything sinking in. Yeah. I'm like, hey, I wasn't that off. I was kind of right. I'm on the right path.
Awesome. What do you have coming up next? I know that we're almost at an hour. Amazingly. Yeah. Time is flown. What are some next projects that we can look forward to from you?
September is a very eventful month for me, seems to be. So I'm here till 21st. Then I'm doing live painting performance for Art All Night at Hilliard on 28th. I don't really know the time. There's going to be a jazz band in one room, and I'll be doing the live painting performance in the other room. I had a solo exhibit there last year, so they invited me back, and I was happy. I love that space as well. We have Arlington Visual Studio Tour. Actually, I have a few brochures. We have coming up, because my studio, my home-based studio, because this is my studio too. I made it mine for the time of being here. So there's an event that the artists of Arlington who wanted to be on the map and participated. There's a map, and you can go to all artists' studios, and I think it's so cool. to go into like artist's mind, and like studio is their brain. It's
Yeah.
how they operate. It's everything, and to see, I think it's really cool. So it's 20.
I think it's the 21st.
21st, it's 2 days.
Yes.
Mine is on the 21st.
Cool. Yeah.
Then
MoCA
that-
also has theirs the same day. We're neighbors because your studio's right by the museum.
Yes,
So,
right
yeah.
behind.
Yeah, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And then every last Sunday, I do collaborations at Bassa. Bassa is a Brazilian music, Brazilian food restaurant. It's a music venue. Every last Sunday, it's a live poetry music, and I do the painting. I've been doing it for a while. It's fun. It's actually so much fun. And when you combine all this creative, and poets are different all the time, energy is different. I'm like, what are they saying with my ear and my hand goes? And then I have fun with this. But then, I don't know, it feels like there's
That's
a
a
lot
lot.
going on.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I think if we'd like, we can open it up to the audience.
Can I also last thing how much
Yeah.
I appreciate being here. It's been really really cool. Gratitude is not. I'm very grateful to be here. I had an amazing experience. I've met so many really cool souls, and including you ladies. You've all been so wonderful, and it's been home, and I've been very happy here. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. So, any questions from the audience? Yeah, go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi. So you were talking about flipping your canvas while painting, and I noticed that quite a few of them, you can flip them almost any way you want.
And
Like, so how do you feel about it? Let's say if like once, and you talked about the art of letting go, so once someone purchased your painting, like how do you feel if somebody would just like flip it?
Like if they buy it and flip it, or if
Yeah.
they flip it, well, they can do whatever they want.
Okay.
If it suits them. I do work for that particular reason. I flip them. I look at that. I want it to make sense from every direction. I flip and I see composition this way, then I flip again, composition. It really can be flipped in many directions. I take this into my thought process to do it, and it suits them better that way. There's no really rules. I do have to sign. I don't have to sign, I guess, but I do sign paintings, and I guess I do sign them in the way, not all of them sign, but like it kind of predetermines the direction, but it doesn't have to be. I'm very happy for that to be.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Do you ever fight a narrative, like a visual narrative, while you're working, in the sense of like a house or a car or a figure comes out and it's a little too clear? Are you trying to push away the figure or something like that?
I have been, for a reason, because I think abstract and expressionism, that particular category, gives you more of freedom. Freedom for me and freedom for my audience. Freedom for the audience or observer to create their own story. So, but interesting enough, in between the last performance until now, I went into the other studio. I don't know what it is, and I had this vision in my head of a rooster. And I already knew, I kind of visualized how it's going to be, the colors, the posture. So I stretched about this size right on the wall, not even framed. And I started, and this is not my practice usually. I try to avoid recognizable images by design. But that one spoke to me. Then I started going at it. Well, it all started out with a choice. When I put primer, sometimes I put words underneath, and that is kind of like planted message for myself or others, and I try to tape it so it comes up eventually, and I'm myself reminder. So for that particular one was the word choice. I was contemplating on the choice, what it means for me, what it means for others. on levels of like spiritual levels, on discovering levels, on political level. I mean, earth, like anything, because choice is such a delicate word, and what it means to choose. And then the rooster came. Actually, was born in a year of a rooster. But I didn't put it together first. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, maybe I'm identifying as a rooster. Then I'm like, I'm a rooster. And then I'm like, you know what? Accept the fact that you're a rooster. Like, it's okay. And then I'm like, what rooster is? I'm like, oh, and I was preparing for, like, I don't prepare hard. Like, I'm going to sit and I'm going to answer. But overall, to remind myself what I believe and what my practice is, just. And then I'm like, oh, rooster is activating the voice. For me, it was activating the voice. Then I kind of like Googled, rooster is actually a really cool character. Except early, I'm always, it's interestingly, I'm a rooster. I'm run late all the time. I'm not a morning person. But there are lots of things that I found I could identify with that. And that rooster kind of now is a self-portrait. But you will not find recognizable, but there's no such a thing as normal either. It can, that's what it is now, and it will shift and develop for the rest of my life.
Great. Yes, in the back.
Well, I have two questions. Kind of going with this not recognizable images, when you finish a painting at that point, is it an image that's recognizable to you, or is it just sort of open to interpretation?
There is a ways that I think a finished work is finished. For me, it is open always to interpretation. I try not to give too much interpretation, because that would be my interpretation. And I don't want it to be mine interpretation. I want others to see for the value of what they see it. And I think there's enough layers, colors, shapes, textures, enough to create your own story in this bucket or in this bucket or in this bucket somewhere. What I look for to finish work, I'm going back to harmony, composition, balance. Is there enough storytelling? Is there enough to make a story? And if there's enough for me, and like when I do live painting performances, sometimes people will come up, I see this and I see this. I'm like, now that you mention, I see it too. It allows your imagination to open up for me and others. So that's why I try not to give too much of a story.
Well, my other question was, you had referenced an internal dialogue that you have during the process, and just out of curiosity, what is that?
Oh, that's a good question. Interesting question. I do think in English, when it's internal conversations, it's a lot. It varies, but English seems to my dream language.
Not in rooster language.
Or rooster language. Wow, that's a good question. I've never been asked that.
So, I know that some of your smaller pieces that you have on display here are studio pieces, and it also plays this good contrast to the fact that most of your studio pieces that you've been developing lately are even larger than the ones that we see in front of us. The big one behind us and its predecessor that was a key piece on your Hellier show. I know you've been challenging yourself with the larger pieces, but wondered if you wanted to speak a little bit about going back to the smaller canvas.
Oh my goodness, smaller ones. I've been painting for large one for a few years, and I went back to smaller recently. But and even my friend, she's like, "Wow, I've never seen you paint small." Like for me, this expression always met in a small felt. But now I'm enjoying both small, big. It's a way to express. It's also a practice for. I feel like it's a practice for next era or for next chapter. It's like, what am I working with? And studio pieces usually always are way more personal than the performances. Because in the studio, the only energy I really connect to and pick out is self. Versus if I do a performance, it's this. And in studio, so I tend to overthink. Then I have to remind myself, hey, don't pray, your thing is, don't overthink. Sometimes you do think though, they're way more, they take more time, they're more slow, because I can. There is no time limit, and they are dialogues and studies for the next thing.
Interesting. Yeah.
I'm looking over here at this painting, and it says 2020, and it's just very different, and the colors are even neon, and I'm curious, like, 2020 and the painting and the differences. Can you talk about it?
So thank you, first of all, for paying attention. Yes, and it's still pretty bright for 2020. So when I had my BFA, a Bachelor's of Fine Art exhibit back in time in Kansas, it was great, but people would come up to me and ask, like, are you okay? Like, it was darker, much dark. It was dark and darker. But each one of them always had a window, chair, a light, or something. So starting from that, my remembering measurement of time, and of course, if you put them now chronologically, I once did. I've put all the 3-year paintings in chronologically, and if you walk by through them, like you're walking the street, this is like one big, never-ending story, and you see the shifts. They make more sense chronologically to observe them, and of course, the style, what I do, and the way I do, it's me. They are me, and they shift, and I think I went through lots of healing. I learned the hard way life at times, and then it became a choice. The choice of color, the choice of expression is no longer just happens. And then I think with time, it got brighter and brighter and brighter, and it's in a pastel now, kind of. You're welcome. Did it answer? But that particular, I don't know, but it's already in the color. And that particular one, during the pandemic, everything was shut. It was hard times for everybody, and interesting way how everybody dealt with that. So the way I dealt with, I did my performances in the street during that time, because everything was shut, no music, no shows. I managed and worked at this little restaurant in Adams Morgan. So every Wednesday I hosted in the distance, 6 feet apart. Well, not I painted it, but me and the friend who owned the restaurant, we hosted the live painting performances in the streets. It never stopped. It just kept on going. It just kept on going. Like, what is this moment representing now? How can I bring color into community as much as possible from problem, solution, but you don't stop. You keep on going.
Great. Yes. Go ahead.
I know you mentioned using a lot of purple recently, but what's one of your favorite colors to use besides purple?
I ask my son that all the time, and it's different all the time. I'm like, it makes sense. You feel that this time, you feel that time. I think it's seasonal. It really is seasonal. There is no one absolute. If anything, black probably the best color. Always love black, and black is every color in it. It's a contrast. But seasonal, feeling the moment. Right now, it's a purple era, and I think purple is because I'm I can't, I don't know, elevating myself somehow, I don't know, studying one, comes out another. It's all connected. Connecting the dots. Yeah. Crown chakra. Per se.
Any other questions? Last question. Yes. Go right ahead. No, it was you. Go right ahead.
So Jackson Pollock was brought up, and then you mentioned not really following other artists or doing a lot of research, or maybe scrolling and looking at other people's work. But there are many other types of artists and many other types of influencers. Who, if anybody, do you draw some of your inspiration from?
It's the same question, though.
Globally speaking,
I don't. I really, like I said, every day, you know what really, really impresses me in life on everyday basis? Kindness. And when someone doesn't have to do something and they still do it out of their, like, that is inspirational to me. So I'm going back to love, and that, I don't know how to answer that. Did no?
That's a good influence. Yeah, I like it. All right. Well, Zhenya, thank you very much, and thank you all for attending. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Great.
Yay. And time.
And that piece is a print, right?
It's
Is
a
that
painting,
print?
but